Hi, I'm Cameron Brooks, and this is Charles Schwab. History of Charles Schwab. An S&P 500 company founded by none other than Charles Chuck Robert Schwab in 1971, which is a bank and stock brokerage firm. Its headquarters is located in San Francisco, California, and has a ranking of 13th amongst the list of largest United States brokerage firms. Schwab is traded on the New York Stock Exchange and has the ticker symbol of SCHW. This company is in the financial services industry and has 345 branches to operate from. Also, Schwab offers an e-trading, or electronic trading, platform that allows the users to trade financial assets, such as fixed income investments, options, mutual funds, preferred stocks, common stocks, futures contracts, and exchange-traded funds. There is a very interesting history behind Charles Schwab Corporation that all started in 1963 when Charles and two partners of his started up their own investment newsletter named Investment Indicator. This eventually became a subsidiary to the company Commander Industries, but then in 1972 Charles was able to buy all the stock for his newsletter. He therefore left and in 1973 changed the name to Charles Schwab and Company. 1975, they were able to set up their brokerage firm, and in that same year, they opened their first branch in Sacramento, California. 1981 marked a big year for the quickly growing company as they became a member of the New York Stock Exchange and client accounts began to grow. Stephen McClinn, executive vice president of Bank of America, in 1983 purchased Schwab for $55 million. However, in 1987, Charles and some management were able to buy the company back from Bank of America for $280 million. In 1991, Schwab acquired Mayer and Schwitzer. 1993, they opened an office in London, England. Then again, in 1995, Schwab acquires another company named the Hampton Company. Charles Schwab would go on to have a couple more acquisitions into their current state today, but the company always strives to do things the right way and has ridden the saying of own your tomorrow. Industry and major competitors. Charles Schwab is in the financial services sector of the Standard & Poor's 500, or S&P 500. Its major competitors include J.P. Morgan, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Berkshire Hathaway, Citigroup, U.S. Bancorp, and Morgan Stanley, all around the S&P 500 and are considered their largest competition. Financial services in the S&P 500. Listed below are 17 of the 67 companies within the financial services in the S&P 500. As you can see, the top 8 are who was previously listed and Charles Schwab's largest competition. Charles Schwab 2018 Annual Report. The 152-page annual report displayed the quote, "Always put the client first." Within the report, we can find important information such as business performance and stockholders' return, financial highlights, letter from the CEO, and much more. For Schwab in 2018, they brought in record numbers of households, daily average trades, new brokerage accounts, net new assets, and everything appeared to be up for their financial highlights, such as their net revenue, net income available, dividends, and even their closing market price at the end of 2018, up 19%. Financial analysts' statements and recommendations. Lying within the Bloomberg chart below, we can see the top 12 statements and recommendations for the stock Charles Schwab. In the first column, we can see the firm, second column, the analysts at those firms, the third one is their recommendation, then the target price that they predict, and finally, the date at which they said so. These recommendations are important when considering buying stock because they are professional opinions from firms, and they are people that may have more knowledge, research, or even a better understanding of what the future may hold for particular stocks and patterns of a company. The top of the list is Deutsche Bank with Brian Bedell saying to hold, meaning neither to look to buy or sell Schwab stock right now. Then we have Morgan Stanley, Michael J. Cypress saying that Schwab stock is overweight and in line, which means he believes that the stock will outperform others in its sector, the financial sector. Finally, amounting the top 3 analysts is Sandler O'Neill and Partners, with Richard Henry claiming that Schwab stock should be bought by all of those considering to do so. Current articles on Charles Schwab. In the month of September, Charles Schwab announced that they would be cutting 3% of their entire workforce. That was said to be 600 positions within the company at all locations and for all levels of work. They mentioned that these cuts were coming because of low profit margins due to the low interest rates, also causing the stock to now sit lower than it had been. In the month of October, Charles Schwab announced that they will be cutting trade commissions on stocks. This was put into effect as of October 7th and is said to be lasting for 2 years. Other competitors followed shortly after their announcements, such as E-Trade and Fidelity. Lastly, November 4th, the Washington Post spoke of how the Dow Jones Industrial Average, NASDAQ, and S&P 500 closed at record highs and may continue on the uprise. When the markets were on the rise, Charles Schwab was affected the same day by its price changing by 0.72 cents and has steadily grown by at least 0.5% in the following days. Since the markets were continuing to uprise, Schwab has reached its highest stock price in 4 months, giving shareholders confidence in their future. Now, compared to its competitors, we can see the highest stock price as of October 1st was held by Berkshire Hathaway at $159.39 per share. The lowest was unfortunately Charles Schwab at $38.76. However, the lines on the graph more importantly label which company over the past 5 years has had the greatest percent change in their earnings per share. Our greatest company then would be JP Morgan at 120.5% change, with our lowest change being 39.92% by Citigroup. Charles Schwab did have the greatest percent change back in June of 2018 with about 160% difference from its previous closes. 5 of the companies actually broke into negative changes over the last 5 years, including Berkshire Hathaway, Citigroup, Morgan Stanley, Charles Schwab, and Bank of America. Trading on the inside of Charles Schwab. The Bloomberg chart below represents Charles Schwab's top shareholders from within the company. It represents information from October 1st, and on this date it shows the top holders in alphabetical order by last name. Atop the list we can find John K. Adams, who was 29,976 shares in the company and has made no recent changes within his position. Now, if we drop one name below his, we can see that Walter Bettinger, the CEO of the company, has 468,263 shares and recently acquired 91,957 more shares. Using this knowledge as an investor, I may think to buy shares of Schwab if top management is taking a bigger position in the company. Also, you must consider more people than just the CEO, of course. If we drop to the 6th person, Jonathan M. Craig has now 0 shares in Charles Schwab and recently just sold off all 12,604 that he once owned. Within the chart, we can see the holders' names, their position, their percent out, and their latest changes, plus the dates that they did these transactions. Current top management within Charles Schwab. Within the Bloomberg chart below, we can see 15 of the current top management in the company. At the top of the list, of course, is Charles Robert Schwab, Chuck, and he is the chairman and founder. At 82 years of age, we can see his tenure and his start date, along with everybody else within. Data that is not displayed but is available to us by clicking compensation, we can find how much money each of these current top management make. The highest earner is Chief Executive Officer, CEO, Walter Bettinger, with an annual salary of $15.6 million per year. Within the top 5, the lowest amount maker is Chief Financial Officer Peter Crawford, and he makes $2.2 million each year. PE ratios, dividend yields, bond ratings, and betas. The financial overview of Charles Schwab and competition is listed below, along with competitor average, S&P 500 average, and Charles Schwab numbers. Charles Schwab PE ratio is third best amongst all these averages, behind Berkshire Hathaway and the entire S&P 500. A higher PE ratio usually means a higher demand for the stock, which this is saying that Schwab stock is gaining a higher demand than majority of the top competition. Their dividend yield is on the lower end, however, which means their annual payment for owning the stock is below that of its competition. They have two different bond ratings, an A and a riskier BBB- bond, all that can be found within the competition's ratings. Lastly, their raw beta is at the higher end, meaning that they have a greater volatility rate and can be knocked off their trend line easier than others. However, all the betas displayed aren't very trendy. Return on equity and capital structure. As of October 30th, Charles Schwab displayed an ROE of 17.9% according to MarketWatch. The return on equity is the profitability of a company based on their assets excluding their liabilities. The S&P 500, with top banks such as JP Morgan and Wells Fargo, sat at 18.6%, which means Charles Schwab sits slightly below that mark. However, for the financial sector, the weighted average is about 17%. Therefore, showing that amongst the S&P 500 companies, Charles Schwab gets the better profit based on what they own. Growth rates for earnings per share, dividends per share, and book value per share for the last 5 years, 10 years, the present, and what is predicted for the future. Again, we can see the top competition of Charles Schwab, the competition average, and the S&P 500 average. Charles Schwab is found somewhere in the middle of all these companies listed for just about every topic. Their earnings per share has gone up 10% for the last 10 years, which sits slightly above the average growth of its competition, 9.5%. Plus, it has destroyed the growth rate of the entire S&P 500. Also, their dividends per share to the present day has increased by 47.83%, which usually means the company is doing well and able to pay out more to their shareholders. Up to the present day, however, Charles Schwab book value per share is $16.37, which sits $33.26 below the competition average. This is saying their common equity to number of outstanding shares is considerably below that of its competition and much lower than the entire S&P 500. Mergers and acquisitions. Once 1987 came around, Charles R. Schwab bought his company back from Bank of America for $280 million. He started to buy other companies. In 1991, they started the trend of buying companies, starting with Mayer and Switzer, which in 2000 got renamed as Schwab Capital Markets. 4 years later, in 1995, Charles Schwab acquires the Hampton Company, who was founded by Walter Bettinger, now the CEO of Charles Schwab. In 2000, Schwab bought U.S. Trust for a whopping $2.73 billion. 6 years later, Schwab was able to sell the trust to Bank of America for $3.3 billion. 2 years before selling U.S. Trust, Schwab was able to acquire Soundview Technology Group for $345 million. Charles Schwab in 2007 acquired the 401k company. Then in 2011, Schwab acquired Option Express and Compliance, Inc. And finally, they purchased their most recent acquisition, Thomas Partners, in 2012. However, that may not be the last of its acquisitions Schwab makes, as they are in talks about merging with USAA later this year and early 2020 for $1.8 billion. Personal analysis. Buy while you can. Stock price going up with a 1.66% dividend, up $6 from last month. This is above average growth of the S&P 500 and companies within the financial sector. Also, if you buy, keep it as a long-term keeper, since economic growth is continuing within the country. Schwab has an opportunity to continue to grow, along with recommendations from analysts, saying in which to continue to buy the stock or hold on and ride the upward curve that it is on. Top management moves also show another reason as to why getting in on Charles Schwab stock is a great idea. Walter Bettinger just himself bought immense amount of stock within the company on top of the shares that he already had. Lastly, following the trend line of the upward growth that it's already on can show why later on Charles Schwab stock can make great money for its shareholders and can continue to boost confidence in those investing within.